Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about in operator. There are many times we have to implement searches where we'll normally use the equals operator with the different fields which we have for search. But there are some requirements where we'll need to implement the in operator, the in SQL in clause while implementing searches. So we'll see how we can implement this. So these are the couple of things which we are going to see how to use the SQL in operator. First, we'll see how to use it with the where clause. So I have an application here. So this is what will see how we can implement. We have a field called employee ID and we have another field called as employee name. So these we have the search and a reset button. Here this search will be implementing the in clause, the in search. So in case I pass employee IDs, right, I will pass multiple employee IDs like maybe let's pass it 5 and 7. So it will give me the result 5 and 7. I'll just reset this. Similarly, we'll see how to do it with a list of values, right? If we have a list of values where we can select multiple values here, multiple selection, right? For example, we have these values here, right? We'll select something else. We'll select something like David and John Smith and James. So on, we'll just click on search. So now we are getting these employees, right? So this is, we'll see how we can implement such kind of searches where we can pass multiple values in the fields and the search result will return us these values. So this, for this example, I have used this view. This is my employee view here. So this is a entity based view. So this is my entity object and I've created a view out of this. So a very simple view which we have, which we will use for this search. Now the next step is we will create a JSPX page where we will add an input text, like we have the employee ID. And so for first we'll just see for the input text, that is employee ID. For example, if we have only the employee ID here, right, we'll add this employee ID in the page. Also we'll add the corresponding button and the table, right? And we have the where clause where we can implement on this button. So we will use the operation binding, and here in the bean class we can just write a simple method. So we'll call an operation binding method from application module, here the where clause search impl, and I'll pass the employee ID which I get from the UI to here. Okay, so here we can have a simple logic like we can call the view object. We can use the where clause here where my employee ID in, and this is the comma separated value which will be returned from the UI, right? So this will be the value whichever we are entering here, right? For example, 3 and 8, that this value will be returned to this where clause in the this where clause method, and it will provide us the result. Okay, so this is for the one variable which we saw, that is the employee ID. Similarly, if we want to implement it for the employee name here, right? So employee name, we have a multiple selection. So in order to implement multiple selection, first of all, we will need an LOV for this, right? This is my uh, this is my read-only view which I'm going to use it. So I have the query select distinct employee name from this employee table, right? So this is a query which I will be using it. Okay, so we'll see how to do it. So we have the view object for the LOV, which is this employee name view, which where I have a simple query here. Now, in order to use this as a multiple selection, we need to drag this view, right? For example, we have our view here. This is my page, and this view, the complete view, will need to drop it here, and here we will have to select multiple selection and ADF many choice. Okay, so once we are done, right, we will get the option to select which attribute you want to select from the view. Here we have only single attribute, the employee name. So the employee name will select this name. Okay, and once we have done this, your UI, the JSP page will look like this. We have to select many choice component, and this will be dropped here. Okay, Now, one thing like we are using trying to create this select menu choice for employee name, which is a string field, right? So you can encounter such errors like if you try to run this page, right? If when whenever you select a value, so before clicking on a button or something, even if you just select a value and if the auto submit is true for this, right, you will get something like the ADF faces error, and you can see some error like Oracle JBO data creation exception cannot create an object of type java.lang.Integer from java.string. So this is the issue which I'm facing in 12.2.1. For the latest version now. So there are some solutions which I tried. So one of this can be, right, you can remove the validator from this. So if the select manage choice component has validator, right, if you remove the validator, it will stop throwing that error. Another thing which you can do is, so is pass the base attribute as a numeric value. For example, when we drop this view, right, for this particular attribute, you can select the base as well as the display attribute. So in the base attribute, if you pass employee ID, which is a numeric field, and in the display attribute, if you give employee name, so this can work in that way as well. But in my case, I'm just going to comment out this validator. I don't need it, so this will solve my issue. So this is one issue which we face with the multi-selection component if you're using any string values there. Okay. Now next step will be to create a value change listener. So for example, I have value change listener created here, and I have created the binding of this, right? So I need to take the values whatever user has provided these values in the UI, right? And then I need to show these values to uh, then my search should work based on these values, right? So in order to take these values from this multi-selection, right, we need a value change listener. So this is my value change listener where I have will take the value change component, will execute this method, process updates. If we do not execute this method, right, sometimes and the value change listener will not have any value. This will return a value as null here. So use this method here, then we take the value banding, and then next is the list binding of this view, right? So if you go to the particular page, it's my page, right? So if I go to the binding, this is my list binding which will get created when I drop this view as a multi-selection. So this is a name, you can see it in the properties, right? So this is a name which we are going to use here in the list binding. So once we take these values, whatever user has selected, right now, we'll get all the selected values using this selected values method. Now, these values we need to separate with like in we need to add codes to these values, right? So for example, this is the first value which I'm going to get. I'll have to add codes to it, and then I'll have to add a comma to it, so that I can pass these values to the where clause, the in clause which we saw in there, right? So we're just formatting it in this way. So the employee name will each value will append this apostrophes. So it will be in quotes the value, and then it will be ending with a comma, and the last comma we don't need, so we'll just remove it. And this is how we store this value. Now this is the value change lesson, right? Now I want this value to be there in my search method as well, so I can store these values using this page store. I've just used this method, the page flow scope, where I have just stored this value. So this is how to get and how to set the values using page flow scope. Now, once I have stored these values, I will go to my where clause here. So I'll get the value from page flow scope. Now, if this value is not null, then I'll just call this method in the AMI and provide the values here. So this is the method which I'm going to call. Similar method here. Previously, we had used employee ID, and here we can use employee name. And here in the in operator, these values, the multi-selection values we are passing in quotes and separated by comma, right? So it will return us the result here. So this is something which we saw here. Now if you want to reset the values, right? So in order to reset, you can just have these. I mean, take the binding of that particular field, whether like employee name is a multi-selection, right? You can just pass this. these double quotes here, okay, and then execute partial target so that um, these values will get cleared, okay. Now, one issue which we saw with this is if I pass both of this employee ID and employee name, right, it will not return me any result because I have separate method for employee ID and separate for employee name, right? Because in the where clause, I can pass only one value at this at one time, right? So either the employee ID or the employee name using a bind variable. So in case if you want to use a view criteria, if you want to pass multiple values, right? If you want searches for multiple values to happen, that also we'll see how we can do it. So this is how we're going to do it. We have the department ID, we have the job ID, these two columns, right? And we have a search button here. So where here we'll be using a view criteria. So we'll see how we can do it. So for so we'll see how to execute this first. So this is my sample view criteria which I have created here. I have the department ID, the job ID, and department ID string. I'll explain to you what it is. So here, if I pass a job ID here, right? So job ID would be something. See what other job IDs available. We have IT, HR, SL. So let's pass. Sorry, we have passed it in the job ID, not here, right? So we got the job IDs with starting with IT and SL. Now, if we want to also add a condition for the department ID, right? So we can do here. So we'll see how we can implement it. So for this, first we need to write a Java class which will handle the in clause in the view criteria. So this is my Java class. We'll just go through this. So this is a Java class which will be extending the view object IMPL, and here we'll try to create the custom operators in the view criteria. And if the name of the custom operator is in, right, then we'll go through it. We'll try to get the values of these and the bind variables in the view criteria and what is the value of this, right? We'll just print this values. The value is not null, right? And if the value we are just considering the string bind variables here, so in this case, it will execute this in clause. So it will execute this SQL statement, the expression substia, right? So we just can just see how we can copy these methods. And so this class will return me the means whenever we pass the values in comma separated values here, right? It will return us the result here. So next step is after we have this method written, right? You have to create a custom in operator in the view criteria. So this is how the method will look. Now we have this employee view where we are going to create a view criteria. This is a view criteria which is got created. And here, if you see, to add an item, right? If you go here, you will have the option to create custom operator. So you can create a custom operator here. Okay, so I just created this in operator, and maximum and the minimum output is 1 and 1. So once you have created this, you can come here and provide this operator. And so it will be available here in the list of the operators. You can choose this operator and provide the bind variable values. So here for department ID, department ID is integer and job ID, and for department ID string, we have created three values here. You see this similarly, we have created the bind variable and we have attached these values. Now, in order for the class which we created, right, and the in operator class to be used by our view object, we need to create the view object IMPL. Example, this is my view, right? I will create the view object IMPL class, and previously it will be extending the view object IMPL, but instead of that, I'll extend this class, the custom class which I created here. Okay, so yeah, this is all we need to do. And after that, when you just search the values, right, we'll be able to get the values here. For example, if I'm passing the department number string here, so if I just pass 3 years, so it should take 3 years. Okay, I'll just reset the search. And next thing which we are going to see is now in this method is one drawback. Like we are only considering the string bind variable. So either you can change your code here so that it will take if you have other data types, right, you can consider those other data types as well. If not, what you can do is you can go to your view object, like for department ID, which is actually integer, right, we can create a transient variable. So you can create a transient variable like this, and you can just provide a SQL value for a 2 char in the department ID column. Okay, so now this will return a string value here. If you see the query, now the query will show a new column added, which is 2 char department ID. If you do not have an EOPS view, you can simply write this statement in your, if you have a read-only view, right, you can just use this 2 char for the column, which is integer, so that it will return you string value. Now in the view criteria, you can just define a different a string variable for it, right? So here, if you can see, we have the department ID and the new column which we created, the department number is string. We're using the inner operator and we're using a bind variable of string data type. So once you do this, right, that's the only thing you will have to do. Either you can create a new column, the view with the string data type, which is here, or you can create a transient variable as I created here in my case. So that will solve the issue. So for example, if you can see, if I'm using this department ID here, right, with the department ID 1, the search is not working properly. It's telling me all the values, right? But if I use the same right for our department number string, right, I'll use 1 and where maybe 5, right? So this will give me the output. So this is a workaround which you can do if you have if you want to work with multiple data types, right, that you need to check. Okay, and last thing which we will see is now in this example, you saw that we dragged this view criteria. We have the option, right, we have this name the criteria whatever is created here. So this is the my employee view, and this is the criteria which was created, the my employee view criteria that I had used here on this page as a query panel and the table, right? So we didn't need any Java class, any bean class for this. Okay. Now, there are cases where you may not need this inbuilt view criteria. You might have to create your fields on your own and then call the view criteria itself, right? For example, I have this page here. So this also we are using two fields, department ID and job ID. These two field inputs will be provided by the user. And on click on search button, I'll execute the view criteria. So in these cases, only few things you need to see, like so what we have on the page here is we have these two input text created, we have the button and the action listener created, then we have the table that this view dropped as a table here. Now we'll get the values of this, right, these two values uh, of these input text in the bean class. So we're defining two string attributes for this and taking those values and using operation binding, right? We're calling a method in the application module to call the view criteria here. Okay, so we'll be calling the view criteria here. So if you go to the view criteria, this is my view criteria search. So here we'll call in the view object, we are calling the criteria, clearing the reset in the criteria and applying the criteria. And then we need to set the where clause param for these two bind variables, the value, whatever we are getting from the UI, we're setting it here. Only one change you need to do here is you need to set the values of these bind variables here as well for the view criteria, because if you do not do it here, right, when you go to this method, this value here, right, this object type, so it will be coming as null. So normally if you see the object type is coming as a value which we are selecting, right, for example I selected 1 and 5 here in the department ID string, right, it showed me here. So this value will not come here, right? So if you're using your own view criteria in this way, just make sure that you set the variables here, okay? And also if the value is not null, right? If the value is null, for example, then reset this to null. Okay, this is the one change which we'll have to do. So this is the page here, and we'll do a search. Like for example, if you want the search with 4 and 5, yeah, department IDs with 4 and 5. If you want to search with job as well, if we search with SL, we'll get the output, right? So this is how you can use. So three methods we saw. Firstly, how we can use the in clause, the in SQL clause in your where clause itself. Which is So the first is how to use a in clause in a where clause itself, how to use it with input text, how to use it with multi-select LOV. Next, if you're using multi-select LOV and if you're using a string data type, right, this is the exception you will get, and how to solve it. Then how to reset the value of the multi-select LOV. Next is how to use in operator in view criteria, right? So in operator we saw how to use, and this is for you can use it for integers, string fields, and also for integers how we can use it, that also we saw it. Now the next is if you're using your view criteria programmatically, how to if you're using calling the view criteria programmatically, the what's the change which you need to do to implement this in operator. I think yeah, that's all for today. Thank you.